Hey everyone, today I wanted to consider what would happen to the characters had the entity never intervened, interacted, or taken them. If the entity was never there, what would their fate be? Dwight got taken after being abandoned on a work outing in the woods. With him not being taken, it's likely he quits his job at that workplace with them abandoning him and potentially leaving him in quite a dangerous situation. This could possibly be an instance where it makes him reflect on his life and he begins to put more weight into his own choices and he doesn't seek the approval or care for the thoughts of those around him so much. It's possible that this moment of being abandoned could have acted as a driving force for him to fulfill a leader role, like he does in the realm. Maybe this situation, like entering the realm, could have been a trigger for some development. Meg, without being taken when out on a run in the woods, will be around to care for her mother. They'll both be able to spend time together before she passes. It's possible after that, Meg could continue a career in running and would maybe have a better outlook on the world, with her being able to spend that time with her mother. Claudette was taken when out on a walk in the woods. She likely continues at college with her studying, growing her vlog, and getting a job eventually with her degree. Jake was taken when out in the woods. Based on the lore we know now about his father actually caring for him, I do think they would reconnect and likely form a better bond, particularly with him being gone for some time. There could be some compromise within his family, and although he may not want the lavish lifestyle that was planned for him, he can likely move forward with it in some way after repairing his relationship with his father. Potentially he works out in the woods or starts some kind of exploration business, something adventurous I imagine. Nia got taken after spray painting Crota's pran. If she isn't taken whilst in there, potentially it's a turning point for her. Equally, maybe it's not. Nia is in a bit of a tough spot at this point, after we discover in her tome lore that she's somewhat responsible for the death of her city's mayor. I think from here, without the experience of the entity's realm, she likely doesn't change her path too much I think, instead continuing to vandalize and pursue her distorted ideals of the right thing. But hey, there's equally always a chance of redemption. Laurie could go down so many different paths depending on which sequel she follows. She likely comes out of the event of Halloween night though stronger and will prepare in some way for if Myers were to ever return. Ace is a case where he'd likely be in hiding and potentially even killed eventually once the debt collectors who were searching for him found him. If not, I think he just continues with his Acey ways, taking on money, gaining more debt, and getting into more dangerous situations. Bill was taken at his moment of death after fighting off a few tanks. Without the entity, he simply dies in this moment. Feng, I think, sadly continues down her path of self-destruction. The realm for her was this new challenge to overcome, and without that I think she likely doesn't change and continues to fall into alcohol. Maybe and hopefully she finds another thing to be passionate or competitive about and is able to have a similar moment of rising to the challenge, but from what we know it's not too clear. David's lore somewhat implies what would have happened had the entity not taken him, which is pick a fight he couldn't win and ended up dead because of it. That's what his friends believe happened when he does disappear. Maybe there's a chance however that similar to Feng, he would be able to move on from his bad habits and the life he had built and create something better for himself. The worst is suggested, but this doesn't mean it's guaranteed. Quentin more than likely dies at the hands of Freddy. Before the entity takes them both, Freddy is chasing Quentin down and it seems pretty likely he's going to get him before they are taken. Without the entity's intervention, I think he does, which is what is suggested too at the end of the 2010 film. Tapp was dying of a gunshot wound when he gets taken by the entity. Without the entity's intervention here, Tapp simply dies. Kate's life would change a decent amount. She appeared to be in somewhat of a rut with her music as a result of the entity's presence. She is unable to write or find inspiration because of this darkness hanging over her, and right after she stumbles upon a cave with entity markings and is nearly taken, she manages to fight it off. Without these corruptions, she likely continues a successful career and spreads her joy further like she was before. This entity encounter seems to be quite an emotional moment, as you could probably understand, and without this, I think her hope and such remains unshaken. Adam more than likely would have died in the train derailment he was in, as he is hit with a detached door. It's probably not something he'll survive. Jeff gets to return to his life and his his dog, after his emotional trip back to Ormond and to the resort, he would likely come away with a better mindset after he moved on with his life, and gained many positive things in it. It would be an emotional moment, but ultimately it's something that would strengthen him, I think. Seeing Ormond, he likely sees how far he's come. Jane is a case where she could have survived her car accident had she not been taken. After becoming sleepy and driving over ice, leading her to drive into a river, there's a chance she could survive. It does say the road she's on is packed with other cars too, therefore her swerving from the road could mean a bystander would have come and pulled her out. She would be able to talk with her father, and likely just get some time to rest and reflect, potentially eventually returning to her show, or pursuing a path in something entirely different, away from the spotlight. Ash was taken during an apocalypse. He was in a Knights of Samaria compound, and was preparing to face down evil and the demons on the torn earth. When he is attacked in the compound by a deadite, if his words this time around do not summon the entity, then he likely simply fights the deadite off, and then returns back to where he would have been, fighting for humanity. Nancy and Steve are likely just returned to their same Stranger Things stories. Their exploration into the Hawkins lab noted in the lore does seem to be an extra from the show, so maybe things do go down differently. However, I think it's more than likely that they would simply continue with their stories. Yui is taken during a famous street race named the Tokyo Kick 3000. She gets taken during this race, and when a fog is engulfing the track. Without this happening, we can assume she probably wins. She likely continues to earn more for her group, the Sakura 7, supporting and becoming more known for her supporting female empowerment. Zarina comes to the Hellshire Penitentiary after hearing the story of Caleb Quinn, also known as Mad Mick. After inspecting Caleb's old cell, only this time not being taken, she'd probably create a documentary on Caleb. Maybe after discovering the old wrench too, she would strive to understand his story better, and reveal the true story behind Caleb, and how he ended up being known as Mad Mick, his path for revenge, and turning away from his inventions, and instead favouring his bounty hunter life. Cheryl is quite simple. Without the entity's influence, she no longer receives the call when at the troubled youth centre, and doesn't get taken, and so continues on helping people in her new role. Still undoubtedly scarred by her experience, but able to help others with her being present in the world. Felix and Élodie are super interesting, because if the entity never took their parents on Dire Island, it means their lives are going to be entirely different. Élodie likely wouldn't be the person we know today, with her never becoming that person, with the main drive being the disappearance of her parents. She may still have taken a path of research into history, but this time around she wouldn't be doing it off the back of trauma or missing her parents, but instead by her own will and drive and love of the subject. Felix, with his parents present, would maybe be able to develop more healthily, and would still probably be an architect, but just a better adjusted one. When he finally has his kid come along, if that were to happen still too, he would of course be present for the birth, with him not being taken. I imagine both Felix and Élodie would also remain friends too, and not be pushed apart from the trauma. More importantly for Élodie is that she would have never been in the Parisian catacombs at the same time, and therefore wouldn't have been stabbed by the Black Veil member, where she probably would have died. Yun-Jin would have died at the hands of the Trickster after his performance in Mighty One Studios. Jill goes on to fight Nemesis and escape Raccoon City, as she would have done, continuing on her Resident Evil trajectory. Leon goes on to fight through Raccoon City and escape as he would have done, continuing on his Resident Evil trajectory. Mikaela has a wildly different path with the entity not intervening. First off, she wouldn't have had dreams of the realm presumably. This would have triggered her to never have her friend Julian stay over, and both of them witness and record the entity encounter. Instead, she just continues on with her life. Julian never disappears. She probably continues to write, continues working at the Moonstone, and maybe still enters the Halloween competition, only with a different story. Jonah's life is wildly changed without him ever having the numbers given to him. These numbers were this creepy plan for the entity to get him to the Chilean graveyard at a certain time to take him. Without these numbers, he'd never go there at all. Sadly, this doesn't change lots of his lore, I think, as he still probably goes to work for the CIA and ends up killing lots of people as a result. Yoichi would have more than likely continued working at his university, and the whole thing with Sadako's return wouldn't have even happened, because I think that does only happen because of the entity saving her from the well. Without that happening, he doesn't lose his students. If this does still happen and he alienates the university and travels out to sea, he would still end up at the lighthouse probably, probably, only this time he wouldn't get taken. I think ultimately his life would go on as usual, or he would come away with a bit more trauma. But hey, that's better than the entity's realm. Maybe he'd find a way to defeat Sadako finally, or be killed by her, falling victim to her curse after he originally escaped. There's really so many paths it could take depending on many variables. Haddie more than likely just continues on with her supernatural research and her podcast. She wouldn't have to re-experience the trauma of the car crash and losing her parents either. I think the way her powers work and her being able to view overlaps would still function the same, as I don't believe that's the entity's intervention doing that. There's a chance when investigating the Garden of Joy that Dredge would still be present if it wasn't also taken, which would obviously be a big danger. Maybe there's a chance she could be absorbed by Dredge as a result, or potentially expose it, revealing the true horrors she spoke of to the world. Ada would continue on with her Resident Evil story, nothing changes for her really. Rebecca is the same, she just simply continues on with her Resident Evil story. Vittorio's story still probably goes down in a pretty similar way. He still likely researches the entity and the realm, and still ends up employing Night, and gets placed into a cell by him later on when he's betrayed. The main thing that changes is that he doesn't get taken when in the cell, and scratching his findings into the floor. This time though, his final sequency attempts doesn't work, and he dies in the cell of hunger. Thalita and Renato are taken whilst they flee the Skull Merchant. There's a good chance in this instance that they die to Merchant's hand, failing to flee, and with her hunting them down with the assistance of her drones. There's also a good chance that they do get away, and manage to actually expose Merchant. It's really just dependent on what happens, and likely how well Renato can hold up with his wounds. Gabriel more than likely would have died at the hands of Hux. After all, Hux had him cornered and would have killed him like he had the other crew, especially because of Gabriel messing with his plan so much. He's basically trapped on Dvarka with him, and there's a low chance he gets away from that, I think. Nicolas Cage is an interesting one because there's a chance that he still pretty much follows the same path without the entity's intervention. It somewhat depends on if the Descend Beyond movie was still being made, even if Blight ever got taken too. The main difference would be Nicolas goes to the set, he does the scene where Blight attempts to summon the entity, only this time it doesn't summon it, and he continues on with filming. Maybe after this failed attempt though, Stamper would have just shut the whole thing down and sent him home. After all, the purpose of this seemed to be to summon the entity, and so when it fails, he's probably just sent away. If the film alternately never got made due to Blight not being taken, then Nicolas just continues doing his cagey things. Ripley would have continued on with her trajectory of alien films, floating in space in cryosleep for another 57 years before being found. Alright, well, that's gonna do it. I do hope you enjoyed, and as always, let me know your own thoughts on what could happen to the survivors without entity intervention down below. Thanks, and goodbye.